The lawyer read my cousin's name 12 times before he read mine once. That was the first thing I noticed. 12 times. The lake house went to Caleb. The investment accounts went to Caleb. The vintage cars went to Caleb. The family business shares went to Caleb. Even the old grandfather clock in the hallway, the one my uncle used to wind every Sunday night while telling me stories about patience, went to Caleb. And every time the lawyer said his name, my aunt smiled a little wider. My mother kept her eyes on the floor. My father cleared his throat like he was embarrassed by my presence. And Caleb sat beside me in his navy suit, pretending to look humble while his thumb moved across his phone under the table. Then the lawyer paused. He adjusted his glasses. "There is one final item for Nora." The room became so quiet I could hear the air conditioner clicking inside the wall. Caleb looked at me for the first time that afternoon, not with concern, with amusement. The lawyer reached into a thin brown folder and pulled out a single envelope. No check, no key, no property deed, just an envelope. It was cream-colored, sealed with dark green wax, and my name was written across the front in my uncle's handwriting. Nora. That was all. My aunt gave a soft laugh, not loud enough to be called cruel, just loud enough for everyone to hear. "Well," she said, folding her hands in her lap, "that's thoughtful." Caleb leaned closer and whispered, "Maybe it's a thank you note." I didn't answer. I was too busy staring at the envelope, because beneath my name, almost hidden under the edge of the wax seal, my uncle had written 5 tiny words. Not for them to see, only for me. "Don't open this at home." I slipped the envelope into my purse without changing my face, but my hand was shaking. And that was the moment I realized my uncle hadn't forgotten me. He had hidden me. The reading of the will took place in a conference room above a bank downtown, the kind of room designed to make grief feel like paperwork. Grey carpet, glass walls, a long polished table, a bowl of untouched mints near the door. Everyone wore black, but nobody looked sad enough. My Aunt Linda dabbed at her eyes with a tissue that never got wet. My cousin Caleb kept checking his watch, probably calculating how quickly grief could be converted into ownership. My parents sat together near the end of the table, stiff and silent, like they were attending a meeting they wished they could skip. And I sat alone on the left side. That had always been my place in the family. Not outside, not exactly. Just far enough to be reminded I wasn't central. Uncle Martin had been the exception. He was my mother's older brother, but in the years when my parents treated me like a problem to manage, he treated me like a person worth listening to. When I was 14 and got rejected from the school art program, he took me to a diner and made me order the biggest slice of chocolate cake on the menu. "Rejection is information," he told me, "not a verdict." When I was 21 and dropped out of college because my father said he couldn't help me anymore, Uncle Martin was the only one who asked, "What do you actually want to build now?" When I started working at a small logistics company for barely enough money to cover rent, he called every Thursday night and asked about my week. Not in the polite way people ask while waiting for you to finish, he actually listened. So when he died suddenly of a heart attack at 68, I felt something break inside me that had nothing to do with inheritance. I didn't come to that room expecting money, but I also didn't expect to be erased. That was the part nobody tells you about betrayal. It isn't always the loss itself. Sometimes it's the public confirmation that everyone else agreed you deserved nothing. The lawyer's name was Mr. Ellison. He had a narrow face, careful hands, and the tired voice of a man who had watched too many families pretend they weren't greedy. He began by offering condolences. Then he opened the will. The lake house in Camden went to Caleb. Aunt Linda squeezed Caleb's wrist. The commercial property on Rose Avenue went to Caleb. My father shifted in his chair. The vintage Mercedes and the old Porsche went to Caleb. Caleb lowered his head, but I saw the corner of his mouth move. The shares in Whitmore Freight Solutions went to Caleb. That one made me look up. Whitmore Freight Solutions had been Uncle Martin's company for almost 30 years. He built it from 2 delivery vans and a rented office with leaking pipes into a regional logistics firm with warehouses in 3 states. Caleb had worked there for less than 18 months. Mostly, according to my uncle, he showed up late, took long lunches, and used phrases like brand expansion in meetings he didn't understand. But now he had the shares, all of them. My aunt looked satisfied. Not surprised, satisfied. That bothered me. After the lawyer finished listing the assets, he moved to smaller items: watches, furniture, art, a wine collection, a storage unit, more things for Caleb, a few things for Aunt Linda, nothing for me. Not even one of the old books from Uncle Martin's study. My mother glanced at me once, then quickly looked away. That hurt more than it should have, because a part of me, a stupid, childish part, had expected her to look offended for me. She didn't. She looked relieved I wasn't making a scene. Finally, Mr. Ellison reached the last page. "As for my niece, Nora Whitmore," he read, "I leave one personal letter to be delivered unopened." He stopped. That was it. One sentence. My cousin exhaled through his nose like he was trying not to laugh. My aunt said, "Martin always was sentimental." The lawyer didn't smile. He slid the envelope across the table. I reached for it, and for one strange second, his fingers stayed on the paper. Just long enough to make me look at him. His eyes were calm, but there was a warning inside them. Then he let go. That was when I saw the writing under the seal. "Don't open this at home." My throat tightened. I turned the envelope over slowly, pretending to examine it. Nobody else noticed. They were too busy collecting wealth. Caleb was already asking about the transfer timeline. Aunt Linda wanted to know when she could access the lake house. My father asked a question about tax implications, which was interesting because he had never asked a tax question in his life unless someone else's money was involved. I placed the letter in my purse. Then I sat very still, because if Uncle Martin had wanted to write me a goodbye, he would have written one. If he had wanted to leave me nothing, he would have left me nothing. But this envelope felt like a door. And my uncle had spent my entire life teaching me not to ignore doors. After the meeting, everyone gathered in the hallway outside the conference room, like actors waiting for the next scene. Aunt Linda hugged me first. Her perfume was heavy and floral. "I know today must be difficult for you," she said. I almost laughed. "For me?" She pulled back with soft eyes. The kind people use when they are about to insult you gently. "You and Martin were close in your own way, but you know how practical he was. Caleb has always been the natural person to carry things forward." Caleb stood behind her, pretending not to listen. I looked at him. "Carry what forward?" His smile tightened. "The company, the properties, the family name." The family name. I had the same last name, but apparently mine was decorative. My mother stepped beside me and said, "Nora, don't make this harder. I haven't said anything. That's what worries me." That was my mother, always more afraid of my silence than anyone else's cruelty. My father put a hand on my shoulder. It was the first time he had touched me in months. "Your uncle knew what he was doing," he said. "I'm sure he did." He frowned, like he couldn't tell whether I agreed or not. Caleb stepped closer. "Look, Nora, I hope there are no hard feelings. Uncle Martin loved you. He just understood who was prepared for responsibility." There it was, the sentence they had been rehearsing in different forms for years. Prepared for responsibility. As if I hadn't been responsible since I was 17. As if I hadn't worked full-time while my parents paid Caleb's rent during his second attempt at business school. As if I hadn't helped Uncle Martin organize shipping data for free when his operations manager quit one December and Caleb was in Aspen networking. I looked at my cousin's perfect tie, his expensive watch, his clean hands. Then I said, "Congratulations." He blinked. That bothered him. He wanted tears. He wanted anger. He wanted a scene he could retell later as proof that I was unstable. Instead, I gave him nothing. I walked toward the elevator. "Nora," my mother called. I turned. She lowered her voice. "Don't let that letter make you imagine things." That sentence stopped me. Slowly, I looked at her. "What does that mean?" Her mouth opened, then closed. Aunt Linda's face changed so quickly most people would have missed it. But I saw it. Fear. Just for half a second. Then it disappeared behind a smile. "Your mother just means grief can make people emotional," Linda said. "Martin wrote lots of strange little notes. He was dramatic that way." Uncle Martin had never been dramatic. He was careful. That was different. The elevator doors opened behind me. I stepped inside. Just before they closed, Caleb lifted his hand in a little wave, like he had won. The elevator dropped slowly. My reflection stared back at me from the metal doors. 32 years old, black dress, cheap shoes polished the night before, purse clutched under one arm like it contained a bomb. Maybe it did. Outside, rain had started falling over downtown. Not hard, just enough to blur the traffic lights and turn the sidewalk slick. I stood under the building awning and pulled out my phone. There were 3 missed calls from my landlord, a message from my manager asking if I could cover an extra shift tomorrow, and 1 text from an unknown number. "Do not go home yet." I stared at it. No name, no explanation, just 6 words. My skin went cold. Another message appeared before I could move. "Coffee shop across from the courthouse. Back booth, now." I looked across the street. There was a small coffee shop on the corner, squeezed between a pharmacy and a tailor. I had passed it 100 times and never gone inside. Through the rain-streaked window, I could see a man sitting in the back booth. Grey coat, white hair, hands folded around a paper cup. Mr. Ellison, the lawyer. He wasn't looking at me, but he knew I was there. For a moment, I considered walking away. That would have been the safe choice. Go home, open the letter, pretend grief had made everything feel more suspicious than it really was. But my uncle's words pressed against my mind. "Don't open this at home." So I crossed the street. The bell above the coffee shop door gave a weak little ring when I entered. The place smelled like burnt espresso and wet coats. A college student typed near the window. 2 nurses talked quietly near the counter. No one looked at me for more than a second. Mr. Ellison stood when I reached the booth. "Ms. Whitmore." You sent those texts? Yes. How did you get my number? Your uncle gave it to me. I sat across from him. My heart was beating too fast, but I kept my voice level. Why couldn't you say this in the office? He glanced toward the window. Because your aunt requested a copy of all correspondence connected to the estate. She can do that? She can request many things. That doesn't mean she is entitled to them. I waited. He took a slow breath. Your uncle instructed me to deliver that envelope to you personally and to advise you not to open it in your home, your car, or anywhere your family might have access. The room seemed to shrink around us. Why? Mr. Ellison lowered his voice. Because he believed someone had been watching you. I didn't speak. Somewhere behind me, the espresso machine hissed. Watching me. The words didn't make sense at first. I lived alone in a one-bedroom apartment above a laundromat. I drove a 10-year-old Honda with a dented bumper. My life was not interesting enough to watch. Who? I asked. Your uncle didn't know for certain. But he suspected. Yes. Who? Mr. Ellison's jaw tightened. Your cousin. A laugh escaped me, sharp and humorless. Caleb? Caleb barely remembers I exist unless he needs someone to feel superior to. That may be what he wanted you to believe. I reached into my purse and touched the envelope. What is this? I don't know. You don't know? Your uncle wrote it himself and sealed it before giving it to me. He said if anything happened to him, I was to make sure you received it after the will was read. If anything happened to him? The lawyer's expression didn't change, but his silence answered before he did. Your uncle was concerned, he said. About his heart attack? About the timing of it. My mouth went dry. Uncle Martin had died on a Tuesday morning in his study. That was what we had been told. Heart attack, sudden, unfortunate, clean. Too clean. I remembered Aunt Linda calling my mother. I remembered my mother calling me. I remembered the way everyone said, "At least he didn't suffer," as if that sentence made death convenient. Mr. Ellison reached into his coat and placed a small folded paper on the table. Before you open the letter, he said, I need you to understand something. This is not about hurt feelings over an inheritance. I never thought it was. No, he said quietly, but your family will say you did. That hit harder than I expected, because I knew he was right. If I asked questions, I would be jealous. If I challenged anything, I would be bitter. If I found proof, I would be dramatic. My entire family had spent years building a version of me they could dismiss. Emotional Nora, difficult Nora, ungrateful Nora. The girl who always thought too much, the girl who couldn't let things go. Suddenly, that reputation felt less like an accident, more like preparation. What is that? I asked, nodding at the folded paper. An address. For what? A storage facility your uncle rented under a business subsidiary, not connected to the estate inventory. I stared at him. Why are you giving it to me? Because he told me to. Why wasn't it in the will? Because if it had been, your aunt and cousin would have known. The coffee shop noise faded. I unfolded the paper. There was an address on the edge of town, near the old industrial park. Unit 118, gate code 0417. Under that, in a different handwriting, were 3 words. Go before midnight. My uncle's handwriting. My pulse thudded in my ears. What's in the unit? Mr. Ellison looked at the envelope in my hand. I believe the letter will tell you. I should have been terrified. Maybe I was. But underneath the fear, something else was waking up. Anger. Not loud anger, not the kind that burns quickly and makes people reckless. This was colder, sharper, the kind that makes your hands steady. I broke the green wax seal. Inside was one sheet of paper and a photograph. The photograph slipped out first. It landed face down on the table. I reached for the letter instead. Nora, if you are reading this, then I am gone, and they have already performed the little theatre I expected. Caleb got the company. Linda got security. Your parents stayed quiet. And you were given almost nothing in front of everyone. I am sorry for that part. I needed them to believe they had won. My fingers tightened around the page. I kept reading. What I left you is not in the will because the will is bait. Do not trust Caleb. Do not trust Linda. And for now, do not trust your mother. I stopped breathing. My mother. The words blurred for a second. I blinked hard and forced myself to continue. For 20 years, someone in this family has been stealing from Whitmore Freight Solutions. Not carelessly, not desperately, professionally. I suspected your father first, then Linda, then Caleb. But 3 months ago, I found proof that the theft was connected to something much older than the company, something that began before you were born. The storage unit contains copies of what I found: bank records, property documents, insurance files, and one recording. If you choose to walk away, I will not blame you. Burn this letter. Let Caleb have his empire. Live your life. But if you choose to know the truth, go to Unit 118 tonight. Do not go alone if you can avoid it. And Nora. The last line sat alone at the bottom of the page. The reason they kept you small was because they were afraid of what you might inherit. I read that sentence 3 times. Then I turned over the photograph. At first, I didn't understand what I was seeing. It was old, maybe 30 years old. A younger Uncle Martin stood outside the lake house beside my mother and Aunt Linda. They were all smiling, but badly, like someone had told them to pretend for the camera. Behind them stood a man I didn't recognize. Tall, dark hair, one hand on Uncle Martin's shoulder. But it wasn't the stranger that made my blood turn cold. It was what my mother was holding, a baby wrapped in a yellow blanket. On the back of the photograph, someone had written a date, June 14th, my birthday. I looked up at Mr. Ellison. My voice barely came out. Who is the man? He looked at the photograph, then at me. I was hoping you knew. I shook my head. I've never seen him before. The lawyer's face darkened. Then I think you need to go to that storage unit. I looked back down at the baby in my mother's arms. Me. At least, I thought it was me, but something about the way everyone stood in that photo felt wrong. Not proud, not happy, caught, as if the picture had captured a secret nobody planned to keep. My phone vibrated against the table, a message from my mother. Where are you? Then another. Come home before you do something stupid. I stared at those words. Come home. Not, are you okay? Not, I'm sorry. Come home. My uncle's warning moved through me like a second heartbeat. Do not trust your mother. Mr. Ellison slid out of the booth. I can't go with you, he said. If your aunt finds out I met you privately, she'll try to have me removed from the estate. Can she? She can try. He placed a business card on the table. Call me after you see what's inside. And Nora? I looked up. If you decide to continue, stop explaining yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you." Then he left. I sat alone in the booth with the letter, the photograph, and a truth I did not yet understand. Outside, rain kept falling. Across the street, the bank building glowed pale and cold. Somewhere above it, my family was probably dividing a dead man's life into assets and signatures. They thought I had received nothing. Maybe that was the point. Nothing is easy to ignore. Nothing doesn't threaten anyone. Nothing doesn't hire lawyers, open storage units, or ask questions about old photographs. I folded the letter carefully and placed it back into the envelope. Then I looked at my mother's message again. "Come home before you do something stupid." For the first time all day, I smiled, because I finally understood something Uncle Martin had known before he died. In my family, stupid was the word they used when I got too close to the truth. I left the coffee shop through the side door. I didn't go home. I didn't call my parents. I didn't answer Caleb when he texted 20 minutes later asking if I was doing okay with a laughing emoji he probably didn't mean to send. I drove to the old industrial park. The storage facility sat behind a chain-link fence at the end of a cracked road lined with empty warehouses. The sign above the gate flickered in the rain. Riverside Storage, open 24 hours. My headlights washed over rows of metal doors. Unit 118 was near the back, tucked between a broken vending machine and a security camera that looked newer than the others. That detail bothered me. I parked with the engine running. For several seconds, I just sat there, listening to the rain hit the windshield. Every smart part of me said to leave, call someone, call the lawyer, call the police. But what would I say? My dead uncle left me a letter saying my cousin might be watching me, my mother might be involved, and there's a storage unit full of secrets about my family. They would call it grief. They would call it paranoia. They would call my mother. So I got out. The rain soaked my hair before I reached the unit. The lock was old but heavy. I entered the code Uncle Martin had written beneath the address. The lock opened. My breath caught. I lifted the metal door. It screamed on its tracks. Inside was darkness. Then the motion light flickered on. At first, all I saw were boxes, dozens of them, stacked neatly, labelled in Uncle Martin's handwriting. Bank records, property transfers, insurance. Caleb, Linda, Margaret. My mother's name. And at the very back of the unit, on a small wooden desk, sat an old tape recorder. Beside it was another envelope. This one had only 2 words written on it. Start here. I stepped inside. The light buzzed overhead. The rain tapped against the metal roof. I reached for the envelope. Then I heard a car door close outside. I froze. Footsteps splashed through the rain. Slow, careful, coming closer. Someone had followed me. The footsteps stopped just outside Unit 118. For a second, nobody moved. The rain hammered against the metal roof. My heart pounded so hard I could feel it in my throat. Then a familiar voice said, "Nora?" I knew that voice. My mother. Not Caleb, not Linda, my mother. I stepped back from the desk. The storage unit suddenly felt much smaller. "What are you doing here?" I asked. She appeared in the doorway, soaked from the rain. For the first time all day, she didn't look composed. She looked scared. Actually scared. Not embarrassed, not annoyed, scared. Her eyes immediately found the boxes, then the tape recorder, then the envelope in my hand, and all the colour drained from her face. "Oh no!" The words escaped her before she could stop them. That was the moment I knew. She knew exactly what was inside. "Mom!" She took a step forward. "Nora, listen to me." "No. You don't understand." "Then explain it." Her shoulders dropped. For several seconds she simply stared at the floor. Then she said something I never expected. "The man in the photograph wasn't a stranger." I froze. "The one standing behind Uncle Martin?" She nodded. My chest tightened. "Who was he?" For a moment I thought she wouldn't answer. Then she whispered, "Your father." I laughed, not because it was funny, because it was impossible. "My father is David." She shook her head. "No." The room tilted. "No. David raised you." My hands began shaking. "Then who was the man?" Tears filled her eyes. "The man in the photograph was Michael Whitmore." The name hit me instantly. Whitmore, Uncle Martin's surname. My surname. Not my father's, Uncle Martin's. My stomach dropped. "No!" My mother covered her mouth. "Michael was Martin's younger brother." I couldn't breathe. My mind raced through decades of memories, questions, comments, little moments that never made sense. Why Uncle Martin had always treated me differently, why he called every week, why he protected me, why he cared. My mother sat heavily on a nearby box. "He died in a car accident when you were 6 months old." Everything inside me went still. "Michael was my father." She nodded. Tears rolled down her face. "Yes." I stared at her, then at the photograph, then back at her. "Why didn't you tell me?" She didn't answer, because she didn't have to. I already knew. Money, inheritance, family politics, fear. The same things that poison families every day. Finally, she spoke. "When Michael died, Martin inherited everything." I listened. "Your father David had debts." More pieces clicked into place. "He agreed to raise you as his own." "Agreed?" The word sounded wrong, businesslike, cold. My mother closed her eyes. "Martin created a trust fund for you." The air left my lungs. A trust fund. I looked at the boxes around us, then at the tape recorder, then at the envelope. And suddenly I understood why Uncle Martin had hidden everything. Because this was never about inheritance. It was about theft. "How much?" I asked quietly. My mother looked away. That told me everything. "How much?" Her voice broke. "Several million." I felt sick. Several million. Money that should have secured my future. Money that could have paid for college, my first apartment, my business, my life. "Where did it go?" She didn't answer. I already knew. Caleb, Linda, the company, the properties, the vacations, the lifestyle, all of it. Built partly on money that belonged to me. Then I heard another voice behind us. "Well?" We both turned. Caleb stood in the doorway, and he was smiling, not nervous, not guilty, smiling, like someone whose secret had finally become public. I was wondering when she'd figure it out. The words echoed through the storage unit. My mother stood. "Caleb!" "Stop." He raised a hand. "You've lied enough." I stared at him. He stared right back, completely calm. That frightened me more than anger would have. "You knew?" I asked. "Of course I knew." No hesitation, no shame, nothing. "I've known for years." The rain outside grew louder. You stole it. He shrugged. No. You stole my trust. Again he shrugged. Legally? Not exactly. That answer made me colder than rage ever could, because it sounded prepared, practiced, like he had rehearsed it. He stepped inside. Uncle Martin spent years investigating. My stomach tightened. He found transactions, fake loans, property transfers, corporate reimbursements. His smile faded slightly. He got closer than I expected. I looked at him. And then he died. Silence. Heavy silence. For the first time, Caleb looked uncomfortable, not guilty, careful, and that told me everything. He didn't need to confess, the reaction was enough. My mother began crying. What have you done? Caleb laughed bitterly. What have I done? He pointed toward the boxes. You think this family survives without money? He pointed at her. You signed documents, then at me, and now suddenly everyone wants to be honest. The room exploded. Years of resentment, fear, greed, secrets, all pouring out at once. For the next 20 minutes, truths emerged faster than I could process them. The trust fund, the forged authorizations, the hidden transfers, the shell companies, the fake consulting payments, everything. Uncle Martin had documented it all, every dollar, every signature, every lie. The boxes contained enough evidence to destroy everything Caleb inherited, and Uncle Martin knew it. That's why the will was bait. That's why the company went to Caleb. That's why the properties went to Caleb. Because greed is easiest to expose when it believes it has already won. The next 6 months changed everything. Not overnight, not magically. The real world doesn't work that way. There were lawyers, audits, investigations, court filings, forensic accountants, thousands of pages of records. Caleb fought every step. So did Linda. My mother eventually cooperated, not because she suddenly became brave, because she finally became tired. Tired of carrying secrets, tired of lying, tired of protecting people who would never protect her. Eventually, the truth became impossible to hide. The trust fund had existed, the money had been diverted, the company had been used, documents had been altered, assets had been purchased using funds that never belonged to Caleb. One by one, things collapsed. The lake house, gone. The investment accounts, frozen. The company, placed under court supervision. Properties sold, assets seized. Lawsuits everywhere. People who spent years acting untouchable suddenly discovered consequences. The most interesting part? The karma wasn't financial. Not really. Money can be replaced. Reputation is harder. Within a year, nobody trusted Caleb. Business partners left, friends disappeared. People stopped answering his calls. The same charm that worked when he looked successful stopped working when everyone knew the truth. And Uncle Martin. In the end, he was right. He didn't leave me the company. He didn't leave me the houses. He didn't leave me the cars. He left me something far more valuable, the truth. Because the truth was the only asset nobody could steal. 2 years later, I stood on the porch of a small house overlooking a river outside Camden. Not a mansion, not a lake estate, just a quiet place. Mine, paid for legally, honestly, the way my father would have wanted. The real father, Michael. I finally knew his story. I knew who he was. I knew why Uncle Martin protected me. I knew why my family spent years trying to keep me small, because people become dangerous when they discover what was taken from them. One evening, I visited Uncle Martin's grave. The wind moved softly through the trees. I placed fresh flowers beside the stone. Then I sat there for a while, thinking, remembering, thanking him. Eventually, I smiled because I finally understood the last sentence from his letter. The reason they kept you small was because they were afraid of what you might inherit. For years, I thought he meant money, the trust, the company, the assets. He didn't. He meant something else: persistence, patience, the ability to keep moving forward when everyone expects you to quit. Those were the things I inherited. And unlike money, nobody could steal them. Not ever.